Okay, thank you very much, Elmat. It's a great pleasure meeting you today. So I will be speaking for half an hour as we agreed on the different different items. First of all, I will be talking about the concept of mass organization or popular resistance in Palestine. And then another part of my talk will be on the current situation in Gaza and what is possible to do to support the Palestinian resistance taking place in Gaza and also in the West Bank.
That is absolutely, sorry for interrupting you. That is absolutely great. Thanks really so much, Islah. Let me, maybe it might be not bad to introduce you briefly to our colleagues, to our friends, to the students here in the classroom, because you know, a very warm welcome to all of you joining now our session on the histories of popular resistance, Palestinian feminist activism, and global solidarity with Professor Islah Jad. Absolutely great. Thanks really so much for joining, for speaking to us. Thanks so much for sharing your analysis with us. And I think it's an absolutely important one when it comes to Palestinian history, when it comes to the Palestinian national movement, when it comes to a feminist perspective on the issue of popular resistance, when it comes to what happened over the last 30 to 40 years. And that for sure can lead us to what can be drawn under a very broad term called liberation as well. So first of all, Islah, I would like to introduce you to our colleagues and friends. Dr. Islah Jad is Associate Professor in Gender Development and Cultural Studies at Birzeit University, where she began teaching in 1984. She's a founding member of the Institute of Women's Studies at Birzeit University, and I definitely highly recommend, please look on the webpage of the Institute of Women's Studies. There are a lot of publications on the issue of Palestine, Palestine liberation, Palestine resistance from different perspectives, for sure, in particular from feminist perspectives as well. So it's an absolutely wonderful resource for all of us to be aware of the Institute of Women's Studies at Birzeit University, and for sure also a very prominent institution in the Palestinian context. Islah is a very, very prominent person in the Palestinian women's movement and combines academic work with feminist activism, helped to establish Inter Alia, the Women's Affairs Center in Gaza, in Nablus, the Child Corner Project in Elbire, and the WATC, the Women's Affairs Technical Committee. Her latest book, Palestinian Women's Activism, Nationalism, Secularism, and Islamism, published in 2018, includes decades-long research on gender issues and women's political participation in Palestine, ranging from the 1930s to the post-Oslo period. So really, thanks again, and I hope it is fine for you as well if I would continue now with a few words about the current situation here at the University of Vienna, because for sure we are confronted with a quite extraordinary situation, especially when it comes to the right of academic freedom, including teaching, the right to speak about Palestine, the right to speak about the genocidal war on Gaza. This is the fifth public event formally embedded in my seminar on Palestine, occupation, war, and development policy, as it is formally titled. We had quite wonderful and I think impressive lectures by Rawab El Mahdi, from the American University in Cairo on the regional dimensions on the war in Gaza by Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories, occupied since 1967. This is the formal title she has, on the genocidal warfare and Western complicity. Then we had, I think, also quite impressive talk by Rashid Khalidi from Columbia University on settler colonialism, the Nakba, and colonial/imperial interventions. And the last one by Tom Pessa, an independent scholar from Tel Aviv, on the concept of settler colonialism and militarism of the Israeli society. And I think what is quite important, and for sure we will also include this in our discussion as well when it comes to the issue of global solidarity, when it comes to the issue of solidarities from different campuses, especially the ones from Western European metropoles, as well as the US. A few days before Rashid Khalidi's lecture should have taken place here on campus, after university in one of the big lecture halls, the rectorate decided to no longer make the lecture hall available, as you know, and argued due to security reasons, it would be necessary to make Rashid Khalidi's lecture exclusively online. Background of this decision, as many of you know as well, was that the Palestine Solidarity Encampment here on campus of the University of Vienna that was built up on the 6th of May this year was forcefully evicted on the 9th of May. So when students decided to build up this Palestine Solidarity Encampment on campus, they confronted, for sure, they confronted the University of Vienna with its policy of censorship and silencing. And for sure, they raised different demands to the university. The issue of demilitarizing universities, boycotting research collaborations with Israeli universities, disclosing all investments in a military industrial complex here in the European Union, just to name a few. It would have been, from my point of view, the responsibility of the university to seriously discuss these demands and to negotiate with students, but not to send police to forcefully evict the protest camp. And for sure, it would have been also the responsibility of the university to allow us to use one of the lecture halls on campus. So, and I think, as I have already mentioned in previous lectures, the rectorate's decision not only illustrates once again a repressive understanding of academic freedom, including teaching, but also makes absolutely clear how the rectorate fears an open and differentiated discussion, debate on the war on Gaza. So I think this is one of the backgrounds we have when talking about solidarity, especially from students' perspectives. And I hope many of us here now in the classroom are quite keen to discuss this ongoing issue with Islah Jad as well. So back to you, Islah. It would be absolutely great to have a kind of discussion on the legacies or the present of popular resistance in the Palestinian context from a feminist perspective, as well as the potentials or maybe also possible limitations the concept has. So I would like to hand over to you. Thank you. Thanks again so much for joining.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your kind introduction. And I am sorry to hear about the restrictions on your academic activities, actually. And this maybe is a clear signal that supporting the national and human rights of Palestinians is intertwined with your activism for real democracy and your right for free speech and academic freedom in your institutions. So all struggles are coming together now to enforce one another, I think. So thank you so much, Professor Helmut, and it's a pleasure meeting you today and your students and your audience. As I started my talk, my intervention will be divided into different topics. The first one about the popular resistance in Palestine. Maybe the scene now is overwhelmed by the resistance that is taking place in Gaza now, which is armed resistance, but this is only one of the phases of the so many forms of resistance that Palestinians followed all along from the inception of the national Zionist project in Palestine to establish a Jewish homeland as a Zionist project for Jews in the world over the land of Palestine. So from the early stages of the implementation of this project, we can witness some peasants' resistance who have been kicked out of their land because the Zionist movement at its inception followed the concept of the Hebrew labor. That, I mean, the land was always planted by peasants, and the owners differs between Ottomans and some Arabs from Lebanon, etc. But the peasants always remained on their land. But with the application of the Hebrew labor concept, the first Jewish settlements kicked out peasants that led to a massive revolt at the turn of the 19th, at the end of 19th century, turn of 20th century. This was about the first, Jewish settlements in Palestine before the creation of the state of Israel. Later on, the massive resistance, popular movement took place in many other, stages by the progression of the Zionist project on the land of Palestine. We are talking about the revolt of 1929, the revolt of 1936-39, that was a very popular peasants' revolts against the influx of Jewish immigration to Palestine and the kicking out of peasants of their land and so many restrictions imposed on peasants by the British Mandate Authority at that time. Women were integral part of all these protest movements. I mean, the equation in Palestine, as elsewhere in the world, once you have a sort of popular resistance, you find more women included. And once you turn into armed resistance, you find less women included. This is not because women cannot hold arms, but, wars are seen as an act of masculinity in most of the societies. And women in wars, they are the protected humans instead of, full participants in wars, even though they of course, they assume that the brunt of the wars after the killing of their families or the displacement of their communities or the destruction of their homes and their lands. So the revolt of 36-39 witnessed a massive participation of women. And here I have to say that, you know, many feminist writings look at nationalism as a male dominant ideology and movements that, you know, marginalize women. But I have to say that the national Palestinian movement was a vital move or a vital step to include women in the national resistance movement. In the 30s and the 40s, women were organized in different form of organizations, but not considered as pan-national organizations. They were organized in different societies, but by the intensification of the national struggle and the intensification of the conflict between Jewish immigrants and native Palestinians, especially starting from 38, women in Palestine organized by the help of the feminist figure in Egypt, you know, at that time, Huda Sha'rawi, organized a pan-Arab conference calling for the support of the national struggle for Palestinian women and their societies, of course, and pushed for the idea to establish branches in all Arab countries of women's union to support Palestinian women. The idea took, you know, took a massive impact in 1944, where in most of Arab countries, women's unions were established to support the national Palestinian struggle. After 48, then the creation of the State of Israel and the what we call it here, the Nakba, I mean the dispersion and the expulsion of the more than 2/3 of the Palestinian people in the land occupied and controlled by Israel to establish its national state. As you might know, the 1947 UN resolution, you know, deciding to divide Palestine between Jews and Palestinians, gave the Israelis 56% of the land of Palestine and 44% to the Palestinians, even though at that time, you know, less than 30% of the land was owned by different ways and means by Jews at that time, and the majority of the land was under the control of the Palestinians. However, 44% was given only to the Palestinians. The dispersion of the Palestinians and the breakdown of the whole society led the creation of so many women's organizations immediately after 48 to re-knitting the social fabric that was totally destroyed of their societies. I mean, at that time, you can find hundreds of, you know, of little children lost from their parents and were found in the streets, under the trees, in mosques, in churches. So many women's organizations were established, you know, to host these children and provide vital assistance to them, whether medical assistance or education or shelter or food, you know, and all what they need. The intensification and the proliferations of so many organizations led by women at that time showed the importance of women's work in supporting their society and trying to re-knit as I said, the broken social fabric of their society. This continued till we witnessed, the first massive demonstrations inside Israel proper. That was in 1976, during what was called later on the Land Day, on the 13th of March, 1967. As you might know, since from 48 to till the 1966, Palestinians who have been remained in the land controlled by Israel, or where the state of Israel was established, there was an estimate of 20% Palestinians left on their land after the creation of the state of Israel. But they were put in camps and under military control. They were not allowed to leave their areas. They were forbidden all sorts of rights, especially the right to their land. And this is because in 1950, Israel issued a very bizarre kind of law. It is called the absent-present law. The absent-present law considered the remaining Palestinians as present, as, between quotations, citizen for the state of Israel, but they are absent when it comes to their properties. So they were not, their properties were considered as properties of absentees. So in 1976, Israel confiscated a big chunk of land from the Galilee area, where the majority of the inhabitants are Arab Palestinians. That led to a massive demonstrations on that day to protest the confiscation of their land. A huge number of men and women were in these demonstrations that led the Israeli authority to open fire and kill 6 Palestinians, civilians, of course, on that day. After this, demonstrations, the Palestinians discovered their collective power, and they realized that getting together and to demonstrate and request, and to fight for their rights was a cornerstone in their movements, also in the West Bank. In the West Bank, we witnessed the creation or the establishment of what we call it grassroots organizations linked to political parties that were considered banned or not allowed. They were underground political parties under the umbrella of the PLO. In 1972, the first local elections were organized in the West Bank, thinking that women will not vote, and also thinking that if they vote, because women were not allowed to be candidates, but they were given the right to vote. So they thought, the Israeli thinkers at that time, they thought that if women are given the right to vote, they will vote according to their clans, because Israel is plagued by this Orientalist condescending form of thinking that we cannot, as Palestinians, form a normal society, but we are divided by our clan ties and families, and we cannot constitute a modern society driven by any sort of collective ideology concerning the nation and its constituencies to form a state as any normal state. So anyhow, when women were given the right to vote, they voted in scores, and they promoted the lists that are belonging to the PLO. So that was the first and the last time for women to vote in any local election under the Israeli control. So in the mass organizations linked to political parties banned and underground, banned by Israel and work underground, managed to establish many grassroots organizations for students, for teachers, for women, for writers, etc. So these grassroots organizations shouldered the first Palestinian popular and massive uprising in 1978 to 1993, when the Oslo Agreement were developed between Israelis and Palestinian in the PLO. The first uprising, the popular resistance, included all stratas of the society. It included women, students, middle class, peasants, refugees. It was, it covered all the geography of the Palestinian landscape, and also all the social stratas in the Palestinian society. Why it was successful? It was successful because it constituted what we can call social movements. And here I will focus my talk on Palestinian women, the subject that I studied and searched for many years. For these organizations to be successful as such, they first of all, they managed to bypass the class divide. For example, in the 30s and the 40s, when I was talking about women's organizations, the leadership of women at that time, they used to come from upper middle class because their husbands were also leaders in the national movement. And as I said, they were, active from within their societies. Their societies were inclusive, were exclusive. They were not inclusive. They were not open for all women. So they played a major role in promoting the Palestinian cause and calling for Palestinian independence. But in the meanwhile, if, for example, we take the revolt of 36-39, we see that women, peasant women, were very active in supporting armed resistance at that time. However, this elite leadership of women, they look at peasant women as their subject or their target for charity, but they were not equal to them, to be included in their societies. While the mass organizations in the uprising, it broke this divide. So women from all walks were included in the ranks of the women's movement: peasants, refugees, poor women, educated women, uneducated women, etc. So this divide was broken, and also the separation between between cities and countryside was also broken. I mean, this divide was also, blurred, and the movement was inclusive for all different kinds of women. That's why the success, it created its own leaders. So we can see women's leaders and figures that have been, developed and trained during this movement. So we saw lots of figures, formed out of this mass movement. Besides, they managed to establish a huge networks of communication between women in all areas, Bedouin areas, rural areas, cities, refugee camps. They were all, included in this huge network of communication, and their their programs, their activities were disseminated, overnight through home visits, through distributing leaflets, through writing slogans on the walls, and this movement was very vital because it was very empowering for women, in the sense that, through the movement, women's issues started to emerge. What does it mean, women's issues, in this respect? For example, the leadership needed women to convey messages to the leadership of the PLO outside. So they needed women's mobility. Some families restricted the mobility of their women. So immediately, women leaders will intervene with the family to convince the family, that this is much needed for the national struggle's sake, and the women, are in full protection of the women's movement. So if they hear about, for example, a case of domestic violence, women's leaders, the community leaders, will immediately intervene, to stop any malpractice against women, or a family doesn't allow their daughters, for example, to continue their higher education. So issues like mobility, education, internal gender relations were all subject to interference from, the women's movement leaders in the meanwhile. This is what I termed that these women managed to develop what I termed a homegrown feminism. Feminism here is not in separation from the agenda for the national struggle. So they, through the movement, through the activism, gender issues emerge, and gender solutions also were found. So they were very empowered within their families, within their communities, and within the national movement at the same time. So these grassroots organizations were vital in enlarging the roles of the popular resistance of the Palestinian people at that time. But this process, with the signing of the Oslo agreement, was interrupted. As I described in my book in details, it was interrupted for many reasons. First of all, to lubricate Oslo, which Oslo agreement did not really fulfill the national aspirations of the Palestinian people. It did not solve the vital issues for the Palestinian people. It did not solve the issues for the return of the Palestinian refugees that have been kicked out of their homeland and scattered all over the world, and especially in the neighboring Arab countries. It did not resolve the question of borders of the Palestinian state, because Israel till this moment doesn't define its own national borders. So it didn't define what is the borders for a Palestinian state. Third, it did not solve the question of Jerusalem, that by the international and UN resolutions, Jerusalem was divided between Western Jerusalem and Eastern Jerusalem. And Eastern Jerusalem, and since after the war, or the 6 days war of 67, was the target of the Israeli policy of Judaization. I mean, confiscating land from the Palestinians in East Jerusalem and build more Jewish settlements on the Palestinian land of the on the Palestine for the Jewish settlements, and of course the restrictions and control of the holy sites for Christians and Muslims in Jerusalem. So Oslo did not solve all of these problems, and of course, and most importantly, it did not lead to a total stop of the expansion of Israeli settlements, and it did not deal really with the existing settlements on the Palestinian land, especially in the West Bank. So to lubricate Oslo, there was an influx of funding, especially from Western countries, to, to lubricate this resolution, which was unjust. Anyhow, the influx of funding led to the creation of so many NGOs, dealing with all sorts of activities. NGOs dealing with, health issues, education issues, environmental issues, besides NGOs dealing with women's issues or gender issues. The creation of NGOs was harmful to a great deal to the Palestinians' women's movement, and it is also harmful to so many social movements all around. So my study of I am not saying that NGOs creation per se is bad, but I'm here evaluating the impact of the spreading of NGOs in its relationship with a successful grassroots social movements that was very powerful at that time. Why the impact was negative? Because many local grassroots leaders moved to the confine of offices of these NGOs. All activities used to be done on voluntary basis. Now it become paid activities. You expect to be paid for it. Besides, all issues of national concern, like national liberation, like women's emancipation, like environmental protection, etc., it became project-led activities, as I termed the spread of the project logic, which is totally different than a cause, that you are defending a cause. When you are involved in a project, it is totally different than being involved in a cause. What is the difference? The difference is that the project logic is confined in a time frame logic, that you have to start the project at certain moment and to end it at a certain moment, and you end it because the funding is ended. But with the end of the funding, does the cause stops being a cause? Of course not. For example, if we are taking an issue like domestic violence or a legal reform. These issues do not, they cannot be confined to a time frame or a project logic. So many of the issues for popular mobilization became issues related to project logic with a look frame, time frame, and a budget, you know. And the very successful social networks that were spreading and covering all the geography of Palestine, this organic, popular networks was transformed into a target group. So you have a project with a look frame and you have a target group. Okay, with this target group, from where it comes, the issues come from the donors. So we have been bombarded by the universal conventions of women's rights, CEDAW, and etc. So that CEDAW says so and so, and CEDAW it became like a holy book. CEDAW says so, we have to report about these issues mentioned in CEDAW, etc. But does these issues, are relevant to what women are living on daily basis? Of course not, because how could you speak about domestic violence and you totally ignore all forms of violence you witness as a woman on the checkpoints, when you go to do any paperwork, when you leave the country, when you go to your school and you are humiliated by checkpoints, even in your own university. I have Birzeit University. I am from Birzeit University. Birzeit University have been raided by the army many times. And students are arrested. Students are killed around, their university campus. So how could you ignore this very intense level of violence and you just focus on domestic violence? So all issues related to CEDAW became in total separation of the reality of women on the ground, the reality they live, especially if they are living in rural area close to settlements. So when they are close to settlements, it means that their children are targeted by the settler violence, not only their children, their water well, their land, their trees. They uproot and burn and cut olive trees. More than 3 million olive trees were uprooted or cut, destroyed or burned, by settlers. Even if you grow, sheep, now settlers, they come and they steal the sheep. They just put them in a truck and they steal them, or if they don't manage to steal them, they kill them and poison them. So how could you, ignore all these forms of violence and you stick to what is going on inside the domestic sphere only? So with this, processes of, the expansion of settlements and the rising of the settler violence, the issues related to women's emancipation, according to the CEDAW agenda, became very much irrelevant in the Palestinian context. And it included the leaders of these NGOs as irrelevant. They are never seen, for example, fighting for issues related to the old feminist issues, like, supporting the families of prisoners or the families of martyrs or the families of, demolished homes or confiscated land, because women's leadership were always present to support women suffering from the consequences of the Israeli settler colonial project on their land. So the processes of the NGOisation, include lots of changes on the structure, on the agenda, and the form of activism of women in the occupied territories. But this, this negative impact, I can say that also NGOs played a very important role in documenting the violations of, of the Israeli settler colonial activities against the Palestinians. They reached out for UN organizations. They prepared well-documented files to submit to International Court of Justice, for example, or to international, to the Criminal Court of International Criminal Court, etc. But maybe Francesca Albanese before me spoke about this. This, came into the frame of not a frame of looking at what is happening from a perspective that is a settler colonial project aiming to uproot Palestinians from their land and kick the population out of their homeland, and see all these violations in a massive political project, as the expulsion of the Palestinian people, as it is obvious now and taking place now in the West Bank and Gaza, but it came under the framework of humanitarian law, that this is a violation or a form of violations of international humanitarian law. And the question, the political question of why Israel is doing what it does, not because it is a settler colonial project, but because everything is going well, with the exception of some violations of the rights of Palestinians, women and girls and children and youth, etc., happening here and there. So the NGOs movement was driven by the humanitarian framework, not by, as Albanese correctly put it in her last project report, that no, it is not a violation of humanitarian law, but it is a full-fledged political project, framed in settler colonial project, and aiming to expel or to to finish, as the Minister of Finance in Israel, we are up now to the final solution, or to the to the crucial solution. The crucial solution is to end up what is started in 48. That in 48 we did not finish the Palestinian people, and this is the time to finish with that, right now. So with this, movement of NGOisation, I have to say that with the intensification of violence, the going back to the grassroots organizations that have been weakened by the PLO structure itself, weakened by the Palestinian Authority, weakened by the Western funding, and weakened by the NGOs movement, it is not easy to regain its power amid these circumstances. So I will stop here. This is the first part of my talk, and I would like now to go to the second part of my talk about the current situation, if you allow me, Ilmot.
Yes, I mean, it would be absolutely great to continue, or if, I don't know, if you would prefer that, we could collect some questions already raised. Let's see, it's 8:22 Ramallah time. Maybe, yes, if you do have another 10 to 15 minutes talking about solidarity, the issue of what are necessary steps to be adopted from these historical experiences on the one hand, and on the other hand, how do you see today's solidarity movement? So maybe, yes, let's continue. So we have then a huge and very complex analysis ranging from the 1930s to today. And yes, please, would be great. Please continue. Thank you.
Okay. I maybe I will just speak for 5-6 minutes about the current situation and why we keep speaking about, Ilan Pape spoke, from many years about the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians to achieve the Zionist projects of controlling all the historical land of Palestine and the kicking out and the expulsion of its people. And now we are going through and witnessing the publishing or the issuing of so many international reports, including UN reports about the a genocidal war on Gaza. What is taking place in Gaza is, as I said, is one phase of the Palestinian resistance. And I would like to give a bit of history of, what is going on right now. If we recall in 2018, when there was the commemoration of the Land Day, there was that was the start of what became known as the March for Return. The March of Return, it is a march that started among the Palestinians living inside Israel in 1948 territories. And it started in 1997. During this march, each inhabitants of a certain city or a certain village, they were organized a massive popular march to go back and visit their villages. For example, in a village called Kufr Buram, people used to go, the inhabitants of this village used to go back to the church in the village because that's a Christian village. The majority were Christian. So they go back to organize wedding, for example, in the old church of their wedding, of the old church of their village, and organize, a collective meal, etc. So the March of Return was first organized by Palestinians inside, inside Israel. But in 2018, the idea was taken by Gazans, and they started to also organize March of Return because, as you might know, 70% of Gazans, they are refugees from what is called now Gaza envelope. I mean, the Gaza envelope, where are many Jewish settlements, all these settlements were built on the properties of Gazans who are now living a miserable life in Gaza refugee camps. So in 2018, they organized the first one. That was in March 2018. And at the beginning, it was in the centers of the cities in Gaza. But later on, it took as a target to go back to the separating wall to the borders between Gaza and the Israeli settlements, east of Gaza, at the east of Gaza. The organizations, the marches were very peaceful. People raised flags. They wear, the traditional dress of their villages. They were accompanied by their children, their grandparents. It involved all sorts of people, and the call of returning to your village or to your homeland was very, very popular and very, very full of emotional belonging. So it involved lots of people, but this peaceful demonstration took the life of more than 300 Palestinians were killed, and more than 8,000 Palestinians were injured. And the target of the injuries were to cripple them, whether, to cripple their legs or, to amputate their arms. To leave deep scars on their bodies. And 16 Palestinians killed during this, marches. Their bodies were taken till now, by the Israeli authority, because part of the punishments against the Palestinians, it is not only to be killed, but also to be, to forbid the families to bury the killed person in the family. So we have a huge cemetery in Israel of the unknown bodies, unknown Palestinians, or the cemetery of numbers. They give each killed person a number, and they don't allow the families to bury their loved ones, including the last one is Walid Dakka from the city of Haifa, who spent in the prison, I think more than 30 years in prison, and he finished his term, and they did not release him because of the situation. And after he died inside the prison, till now they kept his body and they don't allow his family to bury him. Anyhow, this is to say that using or going to popular resistance to claim your rights, it is also considered terrorism for the state of Israel, because a good Palestinian, whether is a completely subjugated Palestinian or a killed Palestinian, but even the subjugated Palestinian should be completely silent when all forms of rights are violated and his land is taken or her land is taken and his house is demolished and his family is scattered, here and there. So in this situation, what is going on in Gaza is a genocidal war. A genocidal war because the aim is to kick the Palestinians out. They are making now Gaza as an unlivable place. We have, for example, now this week, we have 39,000 Palestinian students who are supposed to be submitted to the the end of higher education exam, and they are not, of course, going to do their exams because their schools were destroyed, and many of their colleagues were killed, many of their teachers were killed or imprisoned, and we have 12 universities. All of them were destroyed by all sorts of, bombs, American bombs and Western bombs. So hospitals are targeted, universities are targeted, schools are targeted, nurseries are targeted, and UN centers for shelter, all schools were used by Palestinians as shelters. The last 24 hours, just the last 24 hours, four centers were targeted by Israeli airstrikes and bombarding. And this is, designated a secure area for displaced to go to. So they designate areas for people to go to, and after they go to these areas, it becomes the target of their bombing and shelling. So when we destroy all infrastructure, for example, before yesterday, eight Palestinians belonging to the municipality of Gaza, they were working to rebuild water wells for people to use the water well. They were targeted and killed because they don't want them to rehabilitate the water wells. So people are starving. They are, forbidden to have any potable, secure water resource, no schools, no hospitals, no shelters. In this situation, and with exactly as in 1948, with the indifference of the governments of the Western North that still see Israel as part of it, and now the new passion, if you protest against this genocide, you are anti-Semite, not because atrocities are taking place. So this ongoing genocide is lubricated by depicting Israel by itself first, and Western media and government second, as a country under existential threat, giving Israel as such a carte blanche to defend itself, of course, between quotation. Any critics are silenced, as I said, by the use of the anti-Semitism as a silencing tool. So in this situation, solidarity of the people, not of governments, is very important. It's life-saving. It is life-saving, because, Western countries and Western media portrayed Israel as a oasis of democracy, as the, part of the Western country, as the defendant of civilization, against barbarism in the West, and all what you know of, these empty slogans. But what is taking place now, by these huge machines of Western media, is just facilitating the annihilation and the ethnic cleansing and the genocidal war against Palestinians. There's so many war crimes, there's so many killing, maiming, etc., are not stopped by Western governments. And as we see international humanitarian organizations, whether the International Court of Justice or the Criminal Court, for the March of Return, there were many files about war crimes, because all the killing happened against, peaceful civilians, just marching, just protesting. However, they were brutally killed, and also, as I said, thousands were killed. So people's solidarity is vital here, to raise their voice, to show that what Israel is doing not about defending itself, but it is about the implementation, the full implementation of a settler colonial project aiming at, the annihilation and the expulsion of the Palestinian people, and the taking of their land and the control of their countries. So raising the voice is important. And in the meanwhile, sanctioning Israel is also very important in this respect. So this is, especially for Western countries, it's very vital to fight together against the anti-terror clauses stipulated in joint research projects. Europe have so many projects with Israel. European Union treats Israel as part of it, and it is not a European country. Israel is not a European country. Israel is in the Middle East. It is in the Middle East. It is not in Europe. So so many clauses that, for example, when we benefit of any funding coming from European, we have to sign a clause saying that we are against terrorism, to depict any sort of resistance among Palestinians as an act of terror. This has to stop. This has to stop. Then, so the recommendation is to fight together against these anti-terror clauses, as I said, stipulated in joint research and joint projects with Palestinians. And also, it is very important to engage in joint research and exchange projects with Palestinian universities and support Palestinian students who have been, without universities and without schools in this war. And also stand in solidarity with Palestinian academics through academic boycott of Israeli universities and Israeli academics adopting the Zionist narrative. Israel, formed like an emergency committee to fight back and to fight back against, the sanctioning of Israel. So it's very important, to be in solidarity and with the Palestinian academic, and to follow a boycott of Israeli universities and academic institutions. You can refuse to review any piece of research by an Israeli academic. You can refuse to do any exchange program between your students and a university in Israel. You can refuse to host or to give fellowship or research, fellowships to Israeli academics. And finally, is to sanction Israeli politicians by not allowing them to visit Europe or Western countries, since they have, till now the criminal court is about to issue warrants against the some Israeli politicians and political leaders. And I stop here, and I thank you so much for taking your time to listen to my intervention. Thank you.
Thank you really so much for this very, very broad analysis and picture, and for sure also the current situation in Gaza, the war in Gaza, and as you mentioned, what Francesca Albanese already said in one of her publications, a genocidal warfare on Gaza. And really thank you so much for reminding us on the history of, as a component of what can be labeled as popular resistance, the Great March of Return in Gaza in 2018, 2019, and the way how the colonial authorities repressed and shot at demonstrators on the fence between Gaza and the southern part of Israel. And really thanks so much for the overall and very broad historical analysis on the concept of popular resistance ranging from the 1930s to, let's say, also until today, to the way how different grassroots initiatives, how a social movement, especially in the West Bank, tries to re-adopt the whole issue of popular resistance as well. So I think we just unfortunately have a bit more than 15 minutes left, and I could ask you a lot of questions now. We could start have a discussion on very, very different issues, but I think it would be fine also to include my students here in the classroom. Do you have different questions? Unfortunately, I mean, our technical equipment dates back to the 20th century here at the University of Vienna. That means, yes, you have to come here. We don't have any kind of better microphones. So, Islah, is it fine for you if we collect different questions, or do you want to answer one by one?
Yeah, as you like. If we have so many, we maybe can group them together, but if we have few, we can take one by one.
Yes, I think we have already 5 in the Q&A section here, so absolutely great. Thanks a lot to all colleagues joining online now. If you want to raise different questions, comments, analyses, please use this Q&A section, and for sure we will then refer to the different questions as well. But let us start with my students here in the classroom. Yes, please.
Right. First of all, thank you very much for your very insightful talk. I just want to circle back to something you said earlier in your talk concerning the NGOisation of popular struggle in Palestine. Also, how popular struggle is then subjected to sort of project logic of like Western donors. And I wanted to ask, given that, assume that there has been sort of an aid dependency created in Palestine because a lot of, money comes from Western donors and is funneled into these projects. How do you sort of break out of this project logic, of this process of NGOisation, given that there is a large aid dependency now in Palestinian civil society and with all of the projects going on? Right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you really so much. I think some more questions here in the classroom. And
Ilmot, I couldn't hear properly the question. So if you could just summarize it, please, because there were some interruptions in the sound.
Oh, I'm very sorry. I think this is really the technical equipment here in one of the seminar rooms at the Department of Development Studies. So the colleague asked about the whole issue of NGOisation starting in the 1990s and the way how to shift from popular struggle, from popular resistance to a professional way of dealing with so-called issues. Issues that are demanded by donors. And by the way, one of the Q&A section questions was about CEDAW, about the UN Convention on the elimination, please correct me, on the elimination of all forms of violence against girls and women. More or less, I think that is the formal title. So The question here is how to break out from this destructive cycle of aid dependency, donor funding, and NGOisation of grassroots movement. How to break out from this destructive process?
Yeah. Well, right now, many Palestinian NGOs are getting together against the conditioned funding, that any donor will put any condition on funding for any Palestinian organization, it will not be accepted. So, for example, Israel, as I said, because the BDS and the sanctioning of Israel was very harmful to the image, the liberal image of the state of Israel. So they went to the counterattack. And they formed many organizations like NGOs Monitor, for example, like ADL, for example, Anti-Defamation Defamation League. ADL, it was recently kicked out of Wikipedia because after investigation, they realized that they disseminate false information and fabrication. So they didn't consider it as a reliable, source of information about anything, and they kicked it out of Wikipedia. So this counter attack by the Israeli government did lots of harm to many Palestinian NGOs. And the last step was the criminalization of 6 Palestinian leading NGOs, especially in the domain of human rights, who have been crucial in preparing files, well-documented files of Israel crimes against Palestinians. So they considered these 6 organizations as terrorist organizations. And they asked all their donors to stop funding them. And they attacked their offices, confiscated their equipments, and banned some of their leaders to leave the country, arrest some of them, for certain period of time. Well, this massive attack on Palestinian human rights organization, of course, scared some countries. For example, Germany, Holland, for example, they immediately stopped their funding for these organizations, even though the EU afterwards issued a statement that, nothing was presented to show what are the terrorist activities these organizations are involved in. So some countries stopped their funding, but some other continue their funding. So as I said before, this organization and other organizations came together to sanction the countries that have been scared by the Israeli move, and they decided, for example, many Palestinian NGOs now, they don't get any funding from USAID, money. So sometimes USAID agency begs Palestinian NGOs to be funded by their funds, and they refuse. I know, for example, my university, Birzeit University, we don't accept any USAID funding, because USAID put a condition to sign this anti-terror clause, and they want us to work as surveying our own students. So the alternative is having NGO in Europe supporting, Palestinian organizations and NGOs working to defend the Palestinian rights without any conditions, put by their governments. This is, I think, the solution, and to amplify their voice, because the goal is to silence them. So if we defeat this goal and we amplify our voice in Western countries, this would be a success, I think.
Thank you. And for sure, we can also look at it from the other way around. I mean, international donor agencies, especially the state ones, Western European state-owned donor agencies, are also dependent on Palestinian NGOs and broader understanding of Palestinian civil society. So thanks a lot for your answer. Are there some questions that should be raised in the last, let's say, 10 to 15 minutes?
I have in the Q&A questions. Shall I look at them, or you look at them?
Yes, I do at the same time. But I do have a question from one of the colleagues here, and then I think we will include at least some of the questions raised in the Q&A section. Yes, Pepe, please.
Yes. So I would like to ask you a question about self-determination. I think in the context of Palestine, it is prominently conceptualized through the idea of an autonomous nation state, whether that be through the 2 or 1 state solution. But I was curious to know whether you have seen within the Palestinian context, but especially among women's grassroots organizations or movements, other alternative aspirations of what self-determination can look like outside of just the nation state. Yeah.
Wow, thank you really so much. That is a quite complex question. Yes, over to you, Islah.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, let me tell you a bit of history about some feminist Israeli groups reached out to Palestinian feminist organizations during the first uprising. During the first uprising, lots of Western countries, they were driven by the concept of conflict resolution, and they were always funding lots of exchange and hosting lots of activities of Palestinians and Israelis coming together and see that feminism is the base for, common ground and common struggle. This failed miserably. I was so much involved in these, talks at the beginning. And unfortunately, it didn't work because, there was a drive not to look at the history and to the injustice happened to inflicted on Palestinians, whether men or women, but to look forward, to look forward to have, like a joint struggle against patriarchy, against nationalism. And it was not clear what will be the alternative. When we talk about 1 state solution or 2 state solutions or any political entity, I think we are so far away from achieving any of these. But what we are hoping for, and what we see as feminists, as a perspective for the future, is to be living in a society not controlled by any supremacist ideology, whether nationalist ideology or patriarchal ideology, or any sort of ideology that discriminates against us, whether Jews, or Israelis at that respect, Israelis or Palestinians, Black or white, men or women, straight or LGBT or whatever, I mean to have a society not based on any form of discrimination and based on mutual recognition and respect in a peaceful society. Whether this society will be framed by a national, national state, frame or whatever, I think the important thing is to build or to work to build a society free from all these prejudice and any discriminatory and any discriminatory sort of ideology.
Thank you really so much. I think we have another question here from the classroom here at the Department of Development Studies,
Yeah, so thank you very much for your analysis about the current situation in Gaza and your talk. I have a question referring to popular resistance. As I have a Chilean background, I was thinking about other struggles in Latin America, and in particular the protests in Chile in 2019, which can be interpreted as an attempt to disrupt the dichotomy between state and society in order to not only address questions about society, dignity, and collective self-determination outside of this dichotomy, but also include the actual experiencing of new approaches for a construction of society, community, or you said like social fabric, as you call it, I think. With regard to the Palestinian context, it is probably not that easy to talk about dichotomy between state and society, but I would like to know if you can imagine similarities in these collective attempts outside of existing institutional structures to construct new approaches as to the conceptualization of society. Thank you.
Excellent. It's an excellent question. Thank you. Yeah. Well, actually, yes. For example, we are developing a form of policing. We call it social police. It developed in different areas. First, inside Israel proper, because there are lots of killings, by gangs inside Israel. But these gangs target mainly Palestinians. So lots of Palestinians, we are talking about more than 200 Palestinians so far, have been killed by gang fighting, and this is a new phenomenon. Beside, of course, you have issues related to domestic violence or family violence or whatever. So the idea is to build like a social police, not to go to the state police, because the state police is per se against you. And the gang violence is engineered by the state, the state violence and by the state police. So this is to develop an alternative to the state violence. Me, myself, wrote a lot about, because according to CEDAW and according to the modernization framework, clans and tribes are per se underdeveloped and reactionary, and it's pre-state entities, and they are against women. I wrote against that. And I asked the question that we shouldn't take a cultural stand vis-a-vis any social form of organization. We have to ask the question, why people go to special form of social organizations? Why people go to tribes, for example, committee? Because we have, for the different tribes, we have leadership committees. So we have to ask why women go to these tribes committees. What is the functioning and what is the privilege women gain from going to these, committees instead to instead of the the formal legal system. Women go to because it's quick, it's not expensive, it is many times fair, and you know, you don't need to be humiliated in the corridors, of course, and to hire a lawyer and, you know, big and lobby here and there. So there are forms of social organization that can be developed and be in the benefit of women. Take the example of Gaza. Now, one of the main goals of the war on Gaza is to dismantle, if we can call it, you know, a state authority or whatever. It is not, of course, a state, but to dismantle the governing system established by Hamas in Gaza. You know, طيب, okay, they destroyed their offices, they destroyed, you know, their the police forces, etc. I know from friends in Gaza that now lots of women are working as social police. You know, they are organizing their communities, you know, without any authority. For education, they have no schools. They destroyed the schools. Many women are involved in popular committees to give education in tents and in the displaced centers, you know, to give education to little kids, to give education to students in general. So you have lots of creativities from the people themselves to organize themselves, how to distribute rations, how to distribute food aids. That's why Israel they are targeting these communities, these committees now, because they realize that the communities are organizing themselves and they don't want them to be organized. They want chaos, because chaos and violence will lead people to leave, you know, the country. But people are aware of that. So you have collective kitchen, you have collective, you know, centers for education, you have women police. By the way, women police in Gaza was before the war on Gaza. And it was a fantastic way to deal with issues related to domestic violence, because they are women police. They call them social police. So they are not really police. I mean, they will not open a file in a police station and drag the guy to a prison or whatever, but she has the uniform of a police, but not, you know, the official task of a police that should, you know, go by reporting to the state or to the authority, etc. So it was like, you know, like meddling between the different parties, between the families, between a man and a husband and a wife, between a mother and children, to solve the issues, but without really the stigma of having a file in the police.
Really, thanks so much for explaining to us what are now options despite a genocidal warfare on Gaza for the people still surviving there. Thanks really so much. And I think running through the different questions raised, we are not able, I'm very sorry for that, we are not able to deal with all of them. The issue of BDS, for sure, we can summarize main points, why BDS is not an anti-Semitic initiative, and for sure also to summarize the main history of BDS dating back to, for sure, Palestinian civil society organizations, and the necessity after having realized what the Oslo process included, that boycott, divestment, and sanctions could be one necessary tool to confront the colonial authority, especially in a Western political landscape. For sure, we couldn't deal with the whole issue of a Palestinian left and Islah. It would be a great question to you as somebody really closely observing the Palestinian leftist factions over the last 30 to 40 to 50 years. But unfortunately, I think we are already running out of time. And I think you definitely did answer the whole issue of the kind of collaboration between Palestinian feminists and Israeli feminists dating back to the Oslo period, and the main contradiction that was at that time. So, Islah, thank you really so much. Unfortunately, we could continue this discussion now for hours, for days, for weeks.
Helmut, if you just allow me 1 minute, because there is an important question about the LGBT right in Palestine and how Israel is portraying itself as a safe haven for, you know, LGBT rights and in Israel. But we have to differentiate between the use of Israel of these so-called rights to whitewash its image and to be genuinely in defense of these rights. Because I know of so many cases of Palestinians, men and women, who have been terribly used and blackmailed by Israel because the Israeli authority knew about their sexual identity. So they used this identity against them to blackmail them, whether to cooperate with the Israeli authority or we will defame you in your society, etc. So the question of LGBT for the Palestinians, as many Arabs, we are very private about our sexual identity and about our private life. You know, it is not like in Europe, but LGBT existed and lived peacefully for centuries. And we have many Muslim poets who, you know, spoke about you know, these different sexual identity, and they were respected and they were living peacefully. Yes, they don't go public about their identity, but they are known among their communities and respected and, you know, protected from them. So don't fall into the trap of Israel using this identity to portray itself as, you know, full-fledged democracy. And, you know, as I said, many have been killed or used or blackmailed by the Israeli military authority in the West Bank and Gaza because of their sexual identity.
Yeah, thanks really so much for this comment. And to all of my students, maybe all colleagues still joining us online, I highly can recommend in this context, on the one hand, Joseph Masset, and on the other hand,
Desiring Arabs, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So both of them dealing with the whole issue of pinkwashing, and secondly, for sure, the different historical pathways of dealing with sexual identities in the Muslim world. Thank you. Islah, thanks really so much. It was an absolutely pleasure to hear you, to have your analysis and to reflect, to think about further. And yeah, hopefully we will see again in Palestine. Let's see.
I hope so.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so sorry I couldn't respond to the questions in Q&A, but I hope through the intervention, I hope that I really touched upon some of these questions. Thank you so much, Helmut.
Thank you. Thank you. All the best. Goodbye. And thank you to all our colleagues joining online. I think goodbye. It will be available. The recording will be available soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.